Okay, so I think we can begin now. So first of all, on behalf of HITS, we would like to welcome everybody. Thank you so much for taking the time and joining us this morning. So welcome to the Insurtech Breakfast. In this edition, we have a very special guest and colleague, Carina Popovici. It's the co-founder and CEO of Art Recognition. So besides an art lover, she's also an experienced programmer, having developed her in the past advanced AI algorithms with applications in physics and finance. But now Art Recognition is one of the few Swiss startups opening in the forefront of AI, entirely founded and led by women. So today we'll be exploring the many technologies that are making a huge impact in the art market. Some of these are really trendy right now. So welcome, Carina. We're very pleased to have you. Okay, so let's start from the beginning. It's a very nice place to start. The basics. Tell us a little bit, what is actually NFT right now?
Right. So first of all, good morning also from my side to everyone who has joined us this morning. And thank you so much, Gabi, for the introduction and for the invitation. I mean, it's really great, you know, to be a speaker at the Insurtech Breakfast, finally.
Yes.
And yeah, so indeed, NFTs. So, I mean, as you all know, you know, this is like a very trendy and cool topic nowadays. So I would just maybe allow myself to start like with the basic terminology, because maybe not everyone is an expert in this. So NFT, what's that? So like it's the acronym of non-fungible token, okay? So what is fungible and non-fungible after all? So fungible, it's something basically, so like an asset that can be like exchanged against another asset. So like really a one-to-one relation for the same quantity and quality, right? So suppose you have like a gram of gold, okay? You can exchange a gram of gold for another gram of gold without making like any profit or loss. So it's the same thing. Also exchanging like say a sack of pepper for another sack of pepper is always the same thing. Now, opposed to that are the non-fungible, you know, assets, which means that those assets are not interchangeable, you know, for assets of the same kind. So suppose, for example, that you own like say a wooden statue from a limited series, right? So you could still eventually exchange it for another like wooden statue from the same series, but it's not the same, right? So if that object is being lost, you know, or destroyed, it's gone, like it's unique. It's not something that you could replace. So if you own that, you really are like the sole owner of that particular thing, you know? So that's the difference. So the NFTs, they are like, or the non-fungible assets, okay, they are like more valuable, you know, in the same way as an, you know, historical or artistic value, artistic object is valuable. So that's the difference, right? Okay. And so moving on to the blockchain. I mean, you have like the you have the fungible assets first, which are like the Bitcoins, say. So cryptocurrencies are fungible objects, because you can obviously, you know, you can exchange one Bitcoin for another Bitcoin and you get the same thing, okay? And so non-fungible tokens are like basically unique, like digital representations of assets on the blockchain. You know, so like if you are owning a piece of digital art or if you are owning an NFT to a piece of digital art, then you are really the unique owner of that digital art, you know, even if that digital art is like, you know, freely available to everyone that has an internet connection, basically. So that's the difference. And that's the, so, you know, there are actually like different kind of assets that can be linked to an NFT, but obviously the most famous nowadays is art, right? Because it's not just art that you can link to it. I mean, I will try to, and actually yesterday while I was doing my research, I've learned a couple of interesting, type of assets that are being linked to, NFTs. So it's not just digital art, they can be different things. But, the NFT market on the related to art has sort of exploded, as you know, at the beginning of the year, when this guy Beeple, this digital artist, has sold an NFT to a digital art for like 70 millions, I believe. And so that's when everyone got crazy about it, okay?
All right.
But you can have actually NFTs not only of art, you can have, for example, NFTs of tweets. So I've learned yesterday that the CEO of Twitter, so I think his name is Jack Dorsey. So Jack Dorsey sold an NFT to his first tweet, which reads, "Just setting up my Twitter account," basically. So he sold it for $3 million, okay?
Wow.
Yes, so that's pretty crazy.
Right.
Yes, and obviously the owner is another, I don't know, tech entrepreneur or something. But just to say, I've learned actually, or I heard that also like NBA got into the NFT business. So, so they started like selling NFTs on sports moments. So you have like, I don't know, the best throw of Michael Jordan. I have no idea,
We're experts here on art, not on sports, but yeah, it's a good example.
So just trying to make the point, that there are like different, types of like digital assets basically that can be linked to NFTs, and anyone can buy them. There are like meanwhile digital marketplaces, where you can like buy NFTs, like either with cryptocurrencies, or you can even exchange NFTs. So they are sometimes a little bit like the cards that we were collecting when we were little. I give you that. Yes. So that's like the overall image of it.
Okay.
And obviously, there are advantages, there are disadvantages. For me, it's still a very like incipient market. It's everything at the beginning. So maybe like those who are starting to get into this business would have the first mover advantage, sort of, but it could also be the other way around. Maybe something that is worth like, I don't know, 100 millions today will be worthless tomorrow. It's difficult to say, just because it's everything, it's at start. But yeah, so that's the story about NFTs in a nutshell.
Wow, it's very interesting, especially right now everybody's talking about this trend, the NFT topic. So what is your view about the latest development on it, and what do they mean for the art market precisely?
Yes, so I believe that it's a huge potential to it. Personally, I see NFTs also like an investment opportunity, because like the Bitcoin at first, like when whoever jumped on the first wave, they eventually got really rich at some point. So I can see that this could develop in a similar direction. But again, there are also like some downsides of it that one should keep in mind, like personally, I think the volatility of this market can be really high, because there's just so much uncertainty at first. So I think one has to be, like careful, as I said, or, like those things that are being linked to NFTs, they are like available to everyone who has an internet connection. So I would really ask myself, like why owning or why spending like millions on something that can be seen by everyone else? Okay, I'm the owner of that. That's fine. But it's still on the internet. It's still available for everyone else to enjoy. So this could be a potential problem. Right. But can as I said, there are also advantages to it. The other thing is for the the environment and that sort of questions. The energy consumption is also an issue.
Oh, really? How come?
Yes, it really you know, it requires a lot of energy simply like to put all those things on the internet, like on the blockchains, basically. Like, for example, the cryptocurrencies, so like Ethereum, for example, they announce, you know, that they're going to take some measures. Like, I don't know the details, so don't ask me, but but this is something that people are talking about, you know, that it just takes so much like computer resources, basically, you know, to save all those things. And there is also the question of the issue of the data degradation, you know, like the bit rot, like it starts like over the time, things are just like by their nature, you know, getting worse. I mean, you know, like if you are changing just one bit into an image, it's going to look horrible. And if you change 2 bits, you won't recognize it anymore. So this is also something, you know, that one should keep in mind. So I would say, you know, altogether, I think this is a great market, has a huge potential, but some things have to be kept in mind.
Okay. So let's talk about AI for a bit. So in your opinion, are the algorithms able to emulate creativity? This is a question that it's very, I think, a little bit out there, but technology, it's, you know, it's developing and innovating, you know, all the time. So it's evolving all the time. So what is AI right now for art? Does it mean that it can emulate creativity?
Right. So yeah, that's actually a very interesting, you know, shift in perspective, like from the digital representations of art to actually creating, you know, art with AI. So, I mean, I'd say, you know, like the straight answer to your question is yes. So personally, I believe, you know, that that AI can emulate creativity, and you know, there is sort of proof to that. I mean, if you were following the developments, and maybe most of you did, you know, like last year, Christie's had, or maybe 2 years back, so Christie's has sold like the first AI generated piece for around $500,000, you know. So it's actually a nice interest, a nice story to that, you know. So there is like a, you know, somewhat a blurry portrait of a man called, which they called, so the developers call it Edmond Bellamy. And so Bellamy is like the French translation of Goodfellow, and Goodfellow is the creator, you know, of that typical kind of network. So, you know, a neural network that created the the portrait. So I thought they were like quite smart, you know, in doing their PR. So basically, maybe just to give a really short, like technical note. So like, in general, you know, AI generated art is based on something that's called generative adversarial networks, in short, GAN. So maybe you've heard about GANs, okay? So this is basically like a special kind of like artificial neural network that can learn, you know, patterns from a set of data, and then can generate new examples that look as if they were like similar to those data that they've learned from. So, I mean, there are different types of, you know, neural networks, but this kind of generative networks, they can create, really, they can generate art, as the name says, right? So what the developers did, you know, there is a startup based in Paris called Obvious, okay? So there are like 3 friends, you know, according to their website. So they just like retrieved 15,000 portraits from WikiArts, and they trained their network on those 15,000 portraits. Okay, wow. The network just learned basically how a portrait should look like in general, and created, you know, based on that data, a new portrait. So it's actually not terribly complicated, so to program, you know, that kind of network. But obviously, you know, they had the idea to go and sell it at auction, and it worked. So yes, and the rest is history.
Wow.
Yes, so that's pretty cool. Maybe what I would also like to tell you at this point, because this is something also that I found out recently, which I thought is actually quite pretty cool, you know. So this is like an example of like a network, you know, that creates art not in the style of a particular artist, you know. So as said, you know, it's been trained on portrait and it made portraits out of it, okay? But on the internet, there is a website called Ganxi, okay? So Ganxi is an is an is an AI street artist, well, AI street artist that emulates a well-known street artist. So there is no name on the on the website, but obviously they refer to Banksy, right? So
Right.
I heard they are in a huge fight with Banksy. But other than that, I think this is really cool. So basically what they did, they took like a similar type of network, you know, and they trained it like explicitly on Banksy, right? So they took like all the, you know, everything that Banksy has ever produced and you know, throw it into the network. So that's the difference between the two type of networks. You know, one was trained like on all the artists basically that created portrait, but this one was trained like specifically on this artist. So that's why like whatever they create, it emulates Banksy.
Right.
So yet another example, you know, of emulating human creativity. And so maybe I can give you a little bit more information if I made you curious, like if you want to rush and buy artworks by Ganxi. So, so they have produced 256 artworks. For the developers, this is also a special number because it's the power of 2, whatever. So 256, okay. And they started selling them £1 a piece and adding £1 for each, you know, new artwork. And so yesterday you could buy a piece by Ganxi at the price of £178. Okay, so basically they managed to sell like 178 pieces. And in case you're wondering, you know, how much they could make from this, it's around 30,000. I mean, it's easy to calculate, you know.
So one question, Carina.
Sure.
And by the way, everyone is allowed to ask questions on the fly.
Yeah. You can just raise your hand and because everybody's muted. So
sorry.
No,
Can
it's
I
okay.
also physically raise my hand?
It's all right. It's all right. It's just for everybody that some of them don't have their cameras on. You can just raise your hand and I'll just get to it. So feel free.
So the Ganxi, so the common model, okay, is only trained on Banksy artwork. So not on a second artist to fuse the things. It's only Banksy artwork.
Well, at least, I mean, the text on the website is rather sparse, I would say, so they don't give a lot of information. But they are saying, you know, that it's been trained by on a portfolio of artworks. They say by a well-known street artist, and so with that, I'm assuming that it's really referring to just to him. Yes. But yeah, I thought it's pretty cool. We can create a Gangok, for example.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, it's really cheap, you know, you have to like just, you know, train your network and set up the web shop and let it roll. So, I mean, it's not a great, you know, effort related to that.
I do have a question regarding the galleries, because like, you know, like old school galleries, where they stand with all this technology. I mean, where is like a owner of a gallery, I don't know, small or big, but with all that we're talking about, it's kind of overwhelming for gallery owners. So what is the stand in that?
So actually, that's quite a difficult question, really, Gabi. So, I mean, I think that really the most important point or the most important issue is really to sort of be able to separate, you know, like what is classical art, what is generative art, because generative art is still pretty new. Like this Ganxi thing, this exists like a few months really, so it's like very, very fresh. And so I think some people are, as you are rightly pointing out, a little bit confused, you know, because it's just like not clear what is what. So, I mean, Christie's went for it, you know, and they sold like this piece with a mathematical formula, you know, as the author for a lot of money, but not everyone is Christie's, right? So I think it would be helpful, you know, at some point to start, you know, like defining at least some kind of boundaries, you know, so because some people are saying like AI is not real art. I believe that's not true. You know, I think it's real art. I mean, it's something that you can enjoy and look at. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's been produced by a machine or not, but I think it would help, you know, to bring a little bit more clarity, not necessarily regulations, you know, but just some guidelines, you know, for the people to like, you know, to help them get some orientation into this new landscape. And the other thing is also maybe related to that. It would also be helpful maybe to help the artists themselves, you know, the creators, because I'm hearing, you know, every once in a while that artists would like to start like, you know, collaborating with GANs or with AI, but they just don't know how. I mean, it's sometimes too complicated for them, you know. So I think, you know, it's the job of the developers, like to make this more accessible to the artists, maybe like, I don't know, do some GUI, some graphical interfaces that are more like artist friendly. I don't know, maybe the big, I don't know, companies like Adobe or so could fill in the gap. So this is something, you know, that still has to be like clarified or like brought on the table so that everyone can participate, you know?
Yeah, of course, yeah. So for now, does anybody have questions regarding everything that we've been talking so far? Just in case. All right.
So I think there was a question on the chat, but I don't know if we now or later.
No, so Stefan just he shared the website that you were mentioning. We do have.
Right.
All right.
But I saw Sam raising his hand, and also some other people. There are many hands raising.
So go ahead, Zuhair.
Okay, we have a few questions. Hold on.
Thank you, Sam, or say in Arabic. Shukran. Well, my question was, I mean, it's nice to hear about some stuffs about artificial intelligence and art, but my question is rather than there will be never like the same value of the like real art, or is there in the future maybe a bigger value than this?
I mean, I think that's sort of difficult to tell. And I think there are like two aspects of it, for me at least, you know. I mean, I think that there is a value for the viewer, you know, like if I'm watching something that's produced produced by an AI and it's really beautiful and I really enjoy it, you know, and I would like to have it eventually done, you know, like with real paint on real canvas, then it does have value for me, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it has a huge value on the market. But like the market value of it, of course, it's a different story, you know, like for the real artists. I mean, usually they are saying that is not just the painting itself, you know, that has that adds to that value, but also, you know, the emotions, maybe the experience of that artist. Like if he was in the war, you know, if he broke up and he made the portrait like Modigliani, you know, he painted this beautiful woman, whatever. So there is this tragic story related to that. So, you know, all this kind of emotions, you know, and experience, they are adding to the value of the art. And obviously, I mean, there is not much, you know, emotion that you can like relate to an AI. So I think that would be a difference, at least for now, you know, that would point to the fact that indeed like the classical art should be more valuable because it's just more human related, of course. So just by its intrinsic existence. But other than that, I mean, if we are referring just to looking at it for the viewer, it should matter. I mean, I'm a very technical person myself, you know, so I love, you know, AI generated art. This is a very subjective, you know, point of view, of course.
All right. So we also have somebody else raising their hand. Mirko, you can, if you unmute yourself, you can use.
Yeah, hi everybody.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yes, very well.
Good. Then Carina, first of all, thanks a lot for the incredible insights. I mean, it's something for me absolutely new and yeah, something I'm getting very curious about. Let's say.
Happy to hear.
But like with cryptos, something which is not immediately understandable, at least for me, let's say, it's how are these let's say tokens or yeah, whatever we're talking about valued. Because I mean, we see that they reach you know, incredible valuations in the market, and I mean, supposedly they're not losing any cash flow. So you know, the typical let's say valuation methods don't really probably apply in those cases. So I would like to maybe if you know, if you have some insights about how this pieces of art, let's say, are valued? What kind of metrics do they use to value them? So in order to reach such incredible valuation. And then another question, which is probably related to this, you said at the beginning that when you buy a piece of art like an NFT, you become the owner of it, right? So what does it mean at the end that you become an owner of it? Does it mean that probably, I mean, you are owning it, so therefore anybody who is accessing it on the internet or downloading it or having a view of it is indirectly, let's say, paying you a return or something. So in order to be shown, you're the owner. So if somebody downloads it, for example, you get paid for that.
Yeah. So I'll start with the second question, because honestly, I have no idea what's the answer to your first question. So basically, I mean, what you are saying, like, being the owner, this is exactly the point, that many people are making, and you are totally right. I mean, as an example with the Twitter, like with the Twitter, with the tweet, so like being the owner of an NFT, it does make you the owner of that particular thing, but that does not, imply that nobody else can see it anymore. So you can, I mean, as far as like, maybe there will be like new regulations in place, maybe people will try like to regulate this market a little bit more, but today, as we speak, I think it's really so the case that everyone can download that piece and enjoy them on their computer without having to pay anything to the owner of the NFT. Maybe this will change in the future. I don't know. But nowadays it's really like that, and of course, that brings up the question, like, why is it worth owning an NFT at all, right? Well, so the supporters of it, basically, they are saying that, as the, say, the Van Gogh flowers, there are many copies of it, of course, but the one piece is unique, so being the owner of that original piece makes you unique. So that's, because you can also, I mean, you have like digital art, like the sports or the memes, the cat or whatever. You have that sort of pieces, and there are like hundreds, thousands, maybe, I don't know, hundreds of thousand copies of that particular thing on the internet, which are like really identical, But you are the owner of one of them, like the first one, say, the original cat that was like, very fashionable 10 years ago, the original menu of that. And so that's what makes you unique. And that's why the people are saying that's why it's worth having, because all the other copies, they are like less important. I mean, I don't know if that's really a valid argumentation. I think the market will decide, And about your first question, I mean, I don't know if there is a metric. I have no idea really. But I mean, as you are saying, the Bitcoin has transformed eventually into a huge bubble. So I think the market will just regulate it. I don't, maybe there is some underlying metric to calculate the prices for the NFT, but honestly, I don't know it. So maybe I can do some research and try to inform you like later on, if that's okay for you. Because
that would be awesome, because I would do some research as well, because now I'm let's say I'm triggered by the curiosity. But what I'm afraid of is,
answer to that question.
But what I'm afraid of is that, since probably I'm not the only person who doesn't really understand how this thing works, there might be some sort of frenziness in the market for people, and FOMO, to step in, like, am I missing out something like incredibly valuable, so I buy it or something. So the value increases.
So there are actually like digital marketplaces that really sell NFTs. Like, I don't have a link now, but it's very easy to find it on Google, of course. So you can go like to really special places and purchase NFTs, either with real money or with Bitcoins, and then it's all yours. And so, I mean, if the value would increase, as we hope maybe, then you would eventually be able to like sell it for a profit. But nobody knows, I think, today. So,
okay, thanks a lot for your insight.
Not disappointed.
Thank you for your question. Okay, Sam, you can unmute and ask your question.
You mentioned earlier, okay, the Ganxi and possibly, okay, the Van Gogh or the P Ganxi, if you want to fuse Picasso with Banksy and whatsoever. Since your solution of art recognition, actually, you you coded, okay, models to exactly analyze this. So whether it is authentic Picasso, Monet, Manet, whatsoever. Actually, you have now the codes, and you could reverse code them and make them produce instead of only recognizing, right? And fuse them. So this is a meta art, what you could do with your solution, right?
Certainly. I mean, obviously, I had that thought, before. I mean, our code is not like exactly, fit for that, but it would not require like a terribly difficult improvement, like development, So we will have to like add a discriminator bit. So just like a small coding part to it. But yeah, I mean, it's something that we are actually considering. So maybe we will do it like a side project, sometime in the future. Just to set up the webshop and see if somebody is buying our AI generated art. I mean, that's something it's not a huge effort related to it. But yeah, you are totally right. I love the way you're reading my mind.
All right, Filippo, you have a question?
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, Carina, for the speech. It's been really interesting. I was curious.
Actually, I'm not finished.
Yeah, I imagine. No, but so far it's been really interesting, the conversation. So it's gonna get even more interesting, I guess. But what I'm wondering, a question I might have, I would like to ask you. What makes you think that there's going to be a huge development or potential for this kind of art in the art market? I mean, knowing a bit the art market, I know that it's also a very provocative market. I mean, the logic it follows the art market are not really the same or exactly the same as normal financial markets, It's also a very provocative market. I mean, we have seen many cases, maybe the most famous one is Catalan, okay? And also in the past, I mean, if we look back at decades, also in the 80s, there has been also different kind of digital art, even if we think like video art, okay? And which is definitely a trend and an art form, which has never anyway reached the levels in terms of financial valuation of more traditional forms of art. And I know that also, art investments, there can be of different kind of art investments. So people who invest in art, who are real collectors because they have a strong passion and love for art, they have their private collections, but also there are more financial related art investments to diversify portfolios. And to me, it seems from a financial standpoint, if I have to look at this phenomenon from a financial standpoint, it looks more like an additional way to diversify the portfolio. Probably also to open up a bit more the market, since our market is also very stagnant as a market, so it's also a way to open up, okay, more this market. So I was curious really to listen your perspective on why, in your opinion, there's going to be a huge potential in the future for AI in this sector, in this market.
Yes. So actually, I think there are a couple of aspects, related to that, as always. So first of all, I think that this has like the biggest potential, like for the youngest people, really, who are like technology savvy, they like to be part of the hype. They are on the social media, So I think this could be like a lot more interesting for them than for the, say, elderly gentlemen. I mean, this is a bit of a very drastic difference into the, age categories. But I think the younger people would love to get into this, So just because, they like AI. I mean, AI is nowadays all over the place, also in art. I mean, art should be no exception. So this would be a category, you know, where I would personally think that it would really pick up, you know, and in the future, you know, they will like start buying more NFTs, you know, so they would like eventually create a mass, you know, and also generate digital art. The other thing is, you know, the fact that like a very conservative, you know, and traditional institutions like Christie's and Sotheby's, you know, started getting into this. You know, it shows that they take it seriously, you know, that they believe it has a future. And so that's why, I mean, it's difficult to foresee, you know, like if this is going to be like the best investment opportunity, and so forth. But I mean, it's something that it cannot be held back, you know. It's like it unfolds, you know, so it's going to be impossible like to stand against it basically at some point. And also another point that I'd like to make is the fact that you can, you know, recreate eventually, I mean, with AI, you know, you can recreate dead artists, you know, like old masters or impressionists or so. I mean, as I was saying, you are like training on, say, as on Picasso, and then you are creating a new Picasso. I mean, of course, it's not the same, you know, as it would have been made by the artist, but it's still a way to honor, you know, that artist, to bring something, you know, more to the, you know, it was like Michael Jackson, you know, he died, and like 10 years later, there was a new song where you had his voice in it. And of course, there was a lot of I don't know what they did, but it was something that people loved it, you know, because it brought back the memories, you know, it brought back the beauty of it. It just brought something of that creator. So it's the same, you know, the fact that you can emulate a certain creator with AI. And so I know your question was like more financially, you know, related. Of course, I mean, there are many ways, as you know, probably better than me, there are many ways, you know, or many possibilities to invest into art. You know, I mean, as you know, people are nowadays like buying together a piece of art because it's like too costly for one person to you know, afford it and so forth. So I think, as you are saying, the generative art will be just like one component of the portfolio, and then time will show, you know, like what would be the weight of that component, you know, if it's going to have like a bigger weight or like a smaller one or equal. But I think it's really difficult to tell today, you know, like how it's going to be exactly, but I'm sure, you know, it has a huge potential because of the reasons that I tried to explain.
No, absolutely. No, you're completely right. It's a very extremely volatile market, as you also mentioned before. So yeah, that's why I was curious to hear your perspective, because I know it's very difficult to make predictions in this market. Yes. So that
I also worked in the financial market, actually, so I know exactly what you mean. Yes. No, but I think that really one very important thing is that there are a lot of emotions related to it, you know, so just like people will love it, you know, younger people at first and maybe their parents later, and it will just spread, you know, and also the fact that you can like relate to artists that don't exist anymore with something new and beautiful. So yes. Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Filippo.
Thank you. So I do have a question because we're talking about how there can be like new types of art, right? Like you can create your new Picasso now. So how about AI for authentication? Can you explain to us how does this technology work, if there's any? Because at what degree we can trust some results of it. So, right. Yep.
Yeah, so I'm happy. So I think, you know, talking about authentication, so this is a, you know, a sort of like a subfield where I feel a bit more knowledgeable, because this is something that we are working on. So I will try like first to disentangle the terminology a little bit, because there is also a bit of a, well, not confusion, but I think the term like authentication or AI authentication is sometimes used interchangeably, like say for blockchain authentication and for like, you know, like deep learning authentication, I'm going to call it now. So maybe let me start with the blockchain authentication, and I leave, you know, like our contribution to this for the end. So, you know, like nowadays you have the possibility to say, you know, buy a piece, like a piece of art, like a, you know, a real, so classical piece of art, and then you take maybe a photo of it, and then you are collecting some information about the history of that piece and maybe the ownership, provenance, and so forth, and you pack everything into a document. You assign it a hash key, copy, you know, and you put it on the blockchain, and say, you know, 10 years later or 20 years later, if that piece re-emerges somewhere, you know, you have the possibility to check, you know, if it's the same artwork or not, you know, by basically taking the same photo and recalculating the hash with the same algorithm. Okay, so in that respect, people are calling this, you know, blockchain authentication. And there are even some companies, you know, that offer this kind of service, like either to the buyers and sellers, you know, so to the owners or to the artists themselves, you know. So as an owner, if you are like owning, say, a beautiful painting by an impressionist, you can like collect, as I said, all this information and get a time-proof stamp, you know, on the blockchain, and it's yours, and all the information. Okay, and the artists, you know, they can also certify their like creations, you know, by creating this certificates of authenticity, as they call them, you know, getting a hash key and place it somewhere in the blockchain. And so, you know, for the living artists who are like able to vouch for that piece that is really yours, you know, so themselves, they are using that service, you know, that can qualify, or that does qualify as a certificate of authenticity, because, you know, they can tell like, okay, this is mine. So, but what do we do in the case of deceased artists? I mean, you still have the possibility, like old masters, for example, you still have the possibility to like gather all that information, you know, and put it on the blockchain. But before you're doing that, you know, you have to be really sure that that really is a genuine piece. Okay. And so that brings me to the classical definition of the authentication, you know, like making sure that that piece of art is really by the artist that is attributed to. Okay. And in that respect, you know, there are several, like, let me call them traditional methods, you know, to establish the authenticity of an artwork. You know, there is like the connoisseurship, like there are art experts basically, or sometimes committees of experts. They are just like visually inspecting an artwork, and they can tell, okay, this is by that artist or not. So that's a, well, that's a bit too simple, in my opinion. Then you also have like the provenance research. So basically like tracing back the ownership of an artwork, ideally to the point where it emerged, you know, from the workshop of that artist, but that's quite difficult actually. And then you also have like chemical analysis. So you are looking at the pigments basically. So these are like the three main authentication procedures that existed on the market and still exist, obviously. And I believe that there are some, or well, people think that there are some problems to each of those. I mean, they can certainly help, you know, but very certain they can provide like 100% you know, security. Like, for example, there have been many cases actually, unfortunately, where the experts just got it wrong. You know, they made a mistake simply. I mean, they are humans and humans make mistake. Other than that, there have been also experts subject to corruption allegations. Then the provenance, I mean, if you have like 2 world wars in between, then you would have eventually huge provenance gaps for that artwork, and which can be, you know, filled by forgers or so, or used by them. And then you also have like problems with pigments, you know, like the skilled forgers would just always make sure to take pigments that are contemporary to that artist. So then you can catch them. So, I mean, I'm just saying, you know, that all these methods are helpful, but they can seldom, you know, like provide 100% security. And so that's why, you know, at Art Recognition, we have developed an AI, you know, so we are trying like basically to bring the power of the deep learning model into this game, so into this field. Okay, so we developed an AI, you know, that's able to like learn the main features of an artist. So brushstroke, for example, is the most important feature actually, but there are also others, you know, color and so on. And so the AI is learning those, you know, and then it's able to, you know, identify them or not, you know, on a new artwork. And it's actually quite nice because usually we are like creating a heat map where we show like in different colors, you know, like what are the features that led to the decision of the network. You know, if it said it's a fake, then the red, you know, parts will be like those that can absolutely not be by that artist, and the other way around, right? So that's actually pretty much it. I mean, all this, you know, ranked and evaluated features are then used like to calculate the total probability for the authenticity of that artist. And that's what the client receives basically. So we are preparing a report, you know, which is encrypted, by the way. So it's also encrypted. So we are, you know, we are delivering this information like the authenticity probability and also you know, the heat map. And I see that somebody is asking a question. I saw only the beginning of it, but I can guess the rest. So I'm sure it's about changing the style. Okay.
It's okay. I can read it. Hold on. Okay. So thank you, Juliet. So what happens if an artist changes styles or evolves?
Yes.
Can the AI handle it?
Yes, it can. It can. I mean, we made tests like you cannot test this sort of issue on all the artists because some of them, they don't have too many, you know, paintings or too many artworks that they can produce. But for those that didn't produce much, they also didn't change the style much actually. So for the very prolific artists like Van Gogh, for example, or Cézanne or others, I mean, we've been testing in the past and seen that if you are training just on one period, or if you are training on everything, the result is still the same. Basically, I mean, there might be some difference in the total probability, but really minimal. And the reason for that is that, well, what the experts say is that the brush stroke is like unique. So it never changes across the career of an artist. So even if the style changes, the most important feature, which is really the brush stroke, is like the signature of a human, you know, that stays the same. So it's really a constant across the style. So that's why it's important actually, or it's better to train on everything, because the network will be able like to distinguish between the style actually, between the styles.
Wow.
Yes.
Thank you, Juliet.
Okay. Also, I think you also had a question about the degree of certainty, right, Gabi?
Yeah.
I think people are worried about that. So I think it's fair to say, you know, that the degree of certainty is really dependent on the quality of data that we use for training, you know. So like for like artists where we have like really good data sets, we reach accuracy like higher than say 95%. So really good models. And so because of that, I mean, it's really so important when working on these models, like to assemble a data set that it's really, first of all, with, you know, so including artworks that are authentic beyond doubt. And so because of that, you know, I mean, obviously you can retrieve data from WikiArts and so forth, but we always take like only artworks that are like included in a catalog raisonné. So this counts like the most important institution sort of. So the catalog raisonné is really pretty sure. There are exceptions like Modigliani, of course, but in general, you know, the catalog raisonnés are pretty strong. So that's why we make sure that our data or our images are in the catalog raisonné. And also we try, you know, whenever possible to embed the opinion of art experts. Like, for example, when we were working on Van Gogh, we were like going really through the catalog raisonné, like page by page with the like world leading Van Gogh expert. And so he helped us, you know, he was saying like, okay, there are some doubts on these images, on that image. It could have been real, you know, it could have still been original, but if there was a question mark to it, we just took it out. And so that's why we just make sure always, you know, that we train like on very clean data. Yes.
Awesome. So in general, how does the art market reacts to all these, you know, emerging new technologies overall?
Yes. So, well, sort of with mixed feelings. I mean, as I was saying at some point, I maybe didn't emphasize enough, you know, so like the authentication process is currently like clearly dominated by a few art experts on experts committees who are often, you know, like tend to like ignore anything that contradicts their opinion. So that's a problem in my opinion. But then again, I mean, the standards are changing, you know, like the deep learning are bringing a lot of objectivity, you know, into this market. So it's of course up to the market participants to adhere to the new standards eventually. And we are seeing, that most of the of the market participants, they actually embrace the new technologies because it's just like more objective, it's faster, it's easier to use. You can just take a photo and upload it on the website and that's it. So it's so much easier and so much cleaner. And I even think, that like our objectivity is like the most important or the most appreciated feature in a market that's still very subjective. So as I said, in general, the feedback that we receive is really positive. I mean, of course, there are some people maybe that are like skeptical towards using AI methods, but that doesn't really, disturb our progress. But other than that, it's a very, very positive market. And we can see, that the acceptance is really growing like continuously. And since we have just a couple of minutes,
yes,
maybe I can close just like with a rather provocative thought, because you still have like the big galleries and museums of this world that are nowadays not too much interested in, or they don't have a very big incentive, towards like, revising their collections or even their authentication methods. So imagine, that in a couple of years, a visitor would walk into the museum and would pull his smartphone, and take a photo, and then he's going to check whether that beautiful painting, hanging on the wall really is original. So the museum should better watch out.
That's a good thing. Filippo, go ahead. You have a question?
Oh, no, just to say a suggestion. I mean, probably, I guess, Carina already know, but a good stakeholder or interlocutor regarding these topics from the institutional standpoint, it would be the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam. Probably, it already. They have done already a bunch of this kind of. Of course. So. Fortunately, in Italy, we are still not at that point, but
yes,
in Italy, in Europe, it's really on top of it, I believe.
Yes. So actually, our academic partners, so we work closely with the Tilburg University in the Netherlands because we won a EU grant together, whatever, and they have like connections to the museums in Amsterdam and others. So yeah, something that we have on our radar.
Perfect. So, well, we, of course, just like you said, I want to thank everybody. I think it's been an hour almost of this amazing conversation, but we don't want to cut anybody short. So if anybody has any questions for Carina regarding all the technologies in the art world, feel free to do so. Okay, Sam, go ahead.
I mean, unless there is someone else, please ask your question first. I'll give you 3 seconds or 4 seconds.
No, go ahead. If not, if we can extend, of course. I mean, it's so interesting to talk. Well, just go ahead, Sam.
So my question is, so your AI is relying on a database of pictures that are mostly 2D pictures, right? And with these new phones, you have a LiDAR incorporated into it. So basically, it is able to take 3D pictures. And basically, you would need to have a new database of 3D pictures because then the broad strokes are 3D and you could get an accuracy of 100% at the end. Unless, okay, you have a 3D printer doing it, but that's another issue. Is it something that you would think to if you have a database of art pictures to producing this kind of 3D pictures to renew your model, or how do you see it?
So, I mean, like from a technical standpoint, it would be like basically no effort like to update the technology to use those 3D pictures. But as you said, provided that we would have them, I mean, like creating that database would be a huge effort. I mean, this is not something that we could do here at Art Recognition. I mean, it would need like, a lot of photographers, like scanners, whatever. So it would be like a big project on its own, but it would be possible. So, I mean, one could even start, like, say, for example, taking those photos on just one artist, you know, and retraining and like redoing the predictions, you know, like the new artworks, and see, you know, how big is the difference as compared to our like previous data sets. And if we see that, for example, like it trains so much better, like the results are so much better, then maybe it would worth eventually at some point, like to commission someone to do that. But I think it would be, I mean, very, you know, practically and pragmatically speaking, it would be a huge effort to recreate all the database with a new photo, with a new 3D photos. So the answer is yes, but you know.
For the next decade.
Exactly.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Sam. Anybody else having a question before we go? From my side, I just want to thank everybody that attended today. If it's okay with everybody, I would like to take a photo. Whoever wants to appear in the photo, just turn on your cameras and let me just do a little snaps of this amazing group that is joining us this morning. So let me just do this. Ready?
Wait.
Okay, waiting a few seconds for everybody to just turn on their cameras. Okay. Thank you so much. All right, 1, 2, and thank you so much.
A big thanks also from my side. It was really a great session to be with you today. And thank you again for the very interesting interaction and question. And I really love talking to you today.
Yeah. Thank you, Carina.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
See you soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye.